let's start on the end. Reed, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Reed Hoffman. I'm co-founder of LinkedIn, partner at Greylock, on a few boards, and do a lot of internet investing.
Jim?
I'm Jim Breyer. Hi.
Jim, what are some of your portfolio companies?
Jim, besides being a supermodel in his spare time, what do you do?
Kara. Well, Joe Schoendorf's a partner. There are a lot of friends. I see Sandy. We have a London team here. About 150, 200 companies around the world.
But in which companies did you invest, for instance? Throw some impressive names. We have to impress the people. They came all over the world to see you.
I see Randy, so Facebook, Groupon, Brightcove. There are a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience, so I'll mention those.
And Jim is also on the board of Facebook, on a very small board of Facebook.
I'm Paul Kallen, and I know Jim Breyer.
And he's the CEO of Burda Media.
You are the CEO of Burda Media, because I'll make up jobs for you. You're an exotic dancer in Sri Lanka or something like that. But anyway, go ahead.
And in the time that I don't spend with Jim, which is normally 99.99% of my time, I'm the CEO of Burda Media. And over the last 12 years, I tried to build sort of a digital business.
I expect more applause. He's the guy who is feeding you for the next 3 days.
Nikesh Arora. I work for Google. I'm responsible for all things business at Google.
He's the head of global sales, or is that correct?
Marketing, business development, whatever.
Thomas Eberling, I'm the CEO of ProSieben Sat.1, a German TV company, and before joining media, I spent the last 12 years in life science.
Great. So we're going to start off.
Who are you?
I'm Kara Swisher. This is Y.Vardi, clearly. We've been married for a long time. We're very happy. No, I don't think so. All right. I'll tell a very quick story about Y.Vardi. I met him at one of these conferences, and he came up to me, and he was looking like an unmade bed, like he usually does. And he comes up to me and he goes, Kara Swisher, I owe you $40 million. And I said, great, where's the check? And I'd written a book on AOL, and he had negotiated a better deal after reading my book, apparently. I've not seen that money for years now.
You will not.
So what we wanted to... enough with the Yossi and Kara act. Let's talk to these very fine men about the big picture. We're going to start off with word association, because it's such a large group of people. There's various topics that you could talk about when you're talking about big picture. 10 to 12 years ago, the big picture would have been it's often surrounding a company. AOL was sort of the big picture and sort of leading the way in digital. We're going to talk about digital and media in general. 5 years ago, I think it would have been Google, sort of the dominant. It's still a very dominant company, but it would have been the sort of the topic of excitement. This year, it's Facebook and Groupon and various companies. So we're going to talk a little bit about we're going to do a little bit of word association. But I just want to get, before we start, for each of you to talk about what you think the most important trend right now is in the digital or media sector. As we're going forward, the most important trend that you think is something people should really pay attention to. Why don't we start with you, Reed?
I think it's the construction of applications out of data. One of the things that Web 2.0 has been about is everyone's online with a real identity, real relationships. And so you have hundreds of millions and billions of people creating data flows. You also, of course, have sensors and other kinds of devices. And I think there will be new kinds of applications that come out of both emergent, aggregation, curation, everything around data.
Yeah. Okay.
I like that answer.
Okay. But think of one of your own, Jim. Okay.
So I was reflecting on the panel we just had, and as deeply as I respect the New York Times, I think that indeed traditional media companies, unless they create radical new structures, are going to be obsolete 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe there's any way to protect balance sheet and current income statements, mm-hmm. and at the same time innovate fast enough to build the next generation of leading media companies. I think there have to be phantom stock plans, there have to be startups where they sell ownership to perhaps even a venture capitalist, mm-hmm. and an entrepreneurial team, but existing structures I think will lead to media companies, entertainment companies worldwide becoming in many cases obsolete 10 years from now.
We'll talk about how you structure that later, the solutions, because instead of just decimating everything, I want to also hear what you think actually has to happen.
I fear I don't have any predictions because I'm very curious about it, especially if it comes to the future. If you would ask me what are my three major questions, then the first question is around advertising. How will that develop online? And how can we make sure that not only cost per action is the holy grail, but that attention, interest, and desire play a role? The second question is, how do we really prepare a print company to be successful in the online world? What does it mean for the print product, for the way we organize, for the way we market, and all that? So how do we really change the print product because of the existence of the internet? I think these are two key questions that drive me.
Nikesh?
I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago, we were still evangelizing and talking about how the online behavior is going to change the world, every business is going to get impacted. And I think that's sort of now sort of embedded in our psyche. We understand that life is not going to be the same, sort of to what Jim said, there's no way to protect existing balance sheets and income statements. So if you believe that, going forward, I think the current battle is going to be, in addition to what Reed said, is you're going to have to rewrite the infrastructure for the online world, whether it's browsers, devices, OSs. Everything was written for an unconnected world, whether it's the Symbian OSs of the past. Those things were written in a world where we were not going to interact with each other, where we're not going to spend 90% of our time on a device connected to the cloud. Mm-hmm. And I think that whole rewrite is going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years, which is going to effectively change the entire landscape of technology.
Now, we'll talk about this has been a long time in coming. It's not like we haven't seen the train coming down the tracks miles ago. You think it's just sunk in?
I think it's just sunk in. If you look at the popularity of the iOS or the Android devices or Chrome browsers, and eventually we're going to come to a place where you don't need 5 million lines of code in your device anymore. You got to rewrite everything, and that's going to follow through the entire infrastructure going back. I mean, we can have a whole conversation around social apps and the open web versus the closed web as well. That's going to be another interesting trend.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of mainstream trends which I'm concerned about because I'm more, I think mainstream is for me more important than just being at the cutting edge of technology, which might happen or might not happen. Clearly, audiovisual content is very popular on the net, and a lot of advertising income will be created around audiovisual content. I think social interaction is a very robust trend. And I think more and more people feel increasingly comfortable in buying products over the internet. So the whole area of e-commerce is broadening, and the internet is becoming a major important distribution platform for a lot of products, circumventing traditional retail models. And I think those three trends offer significant opportunities for media companies to diversify.
Okay, I have a question. All of you are involved with some of the most successful companies in the world, or in our space at least. Now try to tell me sincerely what keeps you professionally worried at night. What is really between you and the pillow the thing which threatens you the most? Ray.
I guess I get to always start on these questions. Probably, actually, mostly it's macroeconomics. I actually think that the crisis that we kind of went through in 2008 is, I think, not fully worked out through the system. And I think the macroeconomics affect everything from investing to actually, industries that go far beyond the software and internet that I invest in.
More closer, not about comet coming from the sky and destroying California, but in the space.
How did you know?
Well, Reed is very worried about 2012, but this would all be moot if that's the case. But go ahead.
Exactly. The movie shook my confidence in the future of the world. I guess part of the thing that I think is interesting about a trend that people don't fully always draw the dots between is it's now much cheaper and easier to start internet software companies than there's ever have been before, which means you have the profusion of thousands and thousands of them. So when you're in the early stage investing business, both picking and helping things get above the noise is actually getting harder year by year.
Nikesh, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I was hoping I'd get time to think about it while these guys are going to talk about this.
No. See, we're gonna mess you up. And you can say your new CEO freaks you out a little bit, but that's okay. You don't have to.
I love my new CEO, and I love my old CEO, so that's not a problem.
Look at him.
Now
Rubbing the hands.
that I've done the advertorial for that, right?
Oh, I had to ask.
What keeps me awake at night? Not much, actually, from a professional perspective, Yossi, but I think it'll be interesting to watch the trends. You know, there is a sudden interest in apps. People are suddenly using lots and lots of more apps. So there's an interesting question whether the open web is what takes over in the long term, or the apps world becomes a new world, which we're trying to get used to. I think the notion of real identities and the data flows, which Reed talked about, is an interesting trend to see. There is so much noise in the world. There is so much information out there. Now, what is the number? In 2004, 5 exabytes of data existed, and now you're creating 300 exabytes a year. So we're creating, 60 times the data in a year that used to exist in the history of mankind. That is tremendous amounts of noise. So you will have to find a way to parse through that data. I think the risk we run is we have too much information and don't know how to find it.
So you're scared of too much information?
I'm not scared about it. It's
Right.
Are you afraid that Bing will take over, or Facebook will take over, or I don't know, AOL or Yahoo will take over?
Yeah,
You know what's
that's not
interesting is
likely.
when we've sat in these forums, you always worry about the people you know about. You don't worry about the people you don't know about. And it's always what has happened is in history, the things you don't know about have come out from the left field, and then you talk about them a few years later. So I'm not worried about people who exist. I'm scared about the 2 guys in the garage
I would
who are
like-
working on something who we don't know about.
This is very good. I would like to quote what Michael Eisner said in Goldman Sachs internet conference in '97. He said exactly the same thing. He said, "I'm not afraid from the other studios. I'm afraid from 3 guys in Montana, which will create a new way to see videos." And then they came and Google bought them.
I'm always scared of 3 guys from Montana, but I'm scared of 2 guys in the garage even more.
But that said, in the concrete terms you're planning for today at the same time. But we'll get to the others in a second, but on a more concrete today level, when he's talking about what you're scared of, there's been a great deal made of the Google-Facebook interaction, which is not pretty. And you're going to be the other side, Jim, by the way. How do you
I think
how
the
do you think
interaction's
that's
outstanding.
how do you think that is?
Wonderful. Look
Is
at
that
that sitting here.
something-
Randy's there.
Yeah, and I'm
Sorry.
only using Facebook as the example of social.
Yes.
Because it's the largest example of social. How do you look at that at Google? What is how does the company
Look,
look?
I think, to be fair, as Hubert said earlier, there is a $600 to $700 billion advertising market out there. And over time, a majority of that will transition to an IP-based delivery of advertising. I'm staying away from calling it web-based, but IP delivery-based. So it is a very, very big pie. And that pie will be shared by many players in the ecosystem. It won't be one company's reign. It'll be many players. It'll be Facebook, there'll be Google, there'll be YouTube, there'll be a whole bunch of existing media companies that will play in that space. So in that context, Facebook is an interesting set of applications that people use from a social perspective. Google is an interesting set of applications people use from a search and from finding information perspective. I don't particularly see that this is not a zero-sum game. One is not going to obliterate the other, and one is not going to vanish while the other succeeds. So it is an ecosystem where a lot of companies will survive.
Okay, we'll get back to that in a second. But Jim, why don't you talk about
What I worry about?
Yeah.
So what we try to do is identify what 5 or 10 years from now will be, hopefully, a multi-billion-dollar company. What I worry about is, for the last 5 to 7 years, many of those are based in the greater Palo Alto, Mountain View, Cupertino, San Francisco area. And over the next 5 to 10 years, I think that will definitely not be the case. There will still be several groundbreaking, phenomenal upside companies, but it's our belief, whereas in 2000, all of our partners were based in Palo Alto, today we have twice as many partners in Beijing as we do in downtown Palo Alto. We've just opened a New York office. We have offices in London and Bangalore. And our view is, if you take a 10-year view of where market cap in the media, entertainment, and call it the mobile space, internet might look, I would bet that 75% of the market cap that will be developed over the next 10 years will be outside the United States in these industries, with a large percentage, of course, being in China. And so what do I worry about as an investor?
No, you have to be happy. Who think he has to be happy about this trend?
Well, there are quite a few challenges, but again, the days of driving to our investments and nurturing and working the investments all within 15 minutes of the office are long gone. And I do believe that well over 75% of the market cap by 2020 will be in internet companies that we may not have heard of today, and will be based, whether it's Munich, Beijing, Bangalore, Sao Paulo, and we as investors have to figure out how to take advantage of that.
What about Tel Aviv? You forgot Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv will represent 1 or 2% of that market cap.
In which side of the St. Andreas Fault is Palo Alto? On the east or on the west?
Right in the center.
So for the more traditional companies, when you're at Berta, what worries you is that people...
I think the worries are not very much different from what you have heard. I think the key question for us is how will advertising develop in future? Where will it go to? Is that something only owned by technology companies, and where are these technology companies based? Are these places owned by social media companies? And what role can we find as people who come more from the content side of the business to have interesting offerings for the advertising?
For the advertising, but they're not creating content at Facebook or at this point Google.
We do create content on Facebook, and
no, you do, but they're not. Do you worry about them deciding suddenly to begin?
For us, I think for every medium-sized company, it's very difficult to predict what Google really is doing and what Facebook really is doing 3 or 5 years from now. Right. Not to speak about the new startups that will do something which can harm our business as well. So, and we, as a middle-sized company, you very much are depending on what the key strategic decisions of the big companies, the big technology companies are. That is something we can discuss about, we can find solutions, but it's very difficult to predict. And their next step influences our strategy immensely. So to find that out early and to adjust the business models to that is key for us.
Yeah. But in terms of, do you imagine that content is valuable enough to be something that is less valuable or more valuable in the future when you're looking at it? I mean, like AOL is trying to get into the premium content space. That's their strategy with their...
I think for now we know at least that three types of content is very important and have a business model. If it is very premium, you find people who pay. Mr. Rubini is not here today, but will be, I think, here in the next day. So if you would like to get his expertise, you are willing to pay $5,000 a year, or 7 or 8 or 9 or something like that. So there is a room for that. The second thing we know is that news drive traffic, and if you find a way to get money for traffic, that works. And the third is if you can buy your content or create your content depending on a revenue share, you can survive as well. So the key question is, can a normal media company, in the normal and ordinary way they organize for content, survive and find an advertising formula that is paying for all this? Right. That's an open question.
Right. Now, TV has the most expensive costs in that area in terms of producing premium content. Hollywood is going through quite a change right now, at least, where they produce a lot of television content, but here is probably the same thing. How do you look at those costs changing? I would imagine that would be your biggest, creating this premium content and the money you're getting for it is shifting.
No, I think the biggest concern, obviously, for us is the viewer. Huh? So every night I'm concerned about next day's rating, because I believe if TV is able to create content which people love, which has lighthouse qualities, is creating a fire camp experience, we are relatively well protected from a lot of new channels and platforms. And from that perspective, I think we have to be concerned about cost, but we have to be more concerned about the quality of our program and its impact.
Kara, what you are afraid of?
That you're going to make a dirty joke right now, but not much, actually. Not much. Pretty much nothing. The dark.
Not even Yossi?
No, the dark's afraid of me.
Can we ask the crowd, the audience?
Yes, we're going to ask some audience questions. I just want to get to 2 more quick questions for you all. I'm going to do a quick word association. I want you to have one-word answer for each thing, either company I mentioned or person I mentioned. Okay, and we're going to go through it really fast, like it's like a game show or a reality show or a dating show or whatever. I'm going to say one word, it's word association, okay? And then we're going to get some questions from the audience. Facebook.
That was the answer.
Okay.
Thank you for the answer.
Okay.
Jim Breyer.
Jim?
Just beginning.
Just beginning. Facebook.
Interesting distribution channel.
Trend to watch.
What?
Trend to watch.
Trend to watch. Oh, that's nice.
Important for marketing.
Important what?
Important for marketing.
Important for marketing. Google.
Giant.
Underestimated today.
Good friend to have, difficult foe.
Pays my bills.
Okay.
Pays my
Dangerous.
bills.
Dangerous. Oh, interesting. I agree. And I live with a Google executive.
Maybe that's why it's dangerous.
I'm frightened of them, frankly. Because, you know, they don't take the chip out when she comes home. Steve Jobs.
Genius.
I'm sad.
I cross my fingers.
Hard to replicate.
Cross my fingers.
Read his Stanford speech. Read his Stanford
His Stanford speech. We just put it up. We can actually, he did a beautiful speech at Stanford in 2005. Nokia.
To watch.
Has been MIA for at least 5 years.
Okay.
Acquisition target for Microsoft.
Very good. you can say not Android. Go ahead. No comment. Okay, all right, interesting. A couple more, and then we'll get to some questions in the audience. Let me think.
Kara Swisher.
No. That's not happening. Not
This
hap-
was not a dirty
They're not
joke.
allowed to curse here, and the B word is not a good thing to call a woman. No, you're not answering that.
Rupert Murdoch.
I know it.
Okay.
Rupert Murdoch.
I don't think he has any opinions about Rupert Murdoch.
Is he on
Let's
LinkedIn?
see. One word is difficult.
Genius.
Grand old man.
Media baron.
Strong competitor.
Right, absolutely. Last couple ones. Smartphones.
The future.
I thought you were going to ask about Yahoo.
I'm going to. No, I will.
Again, smartphones. We'll probably invest $100 million around smartphones this year.
Wow.
Interesting distribution channel.
Won't be any other kind.
What?
There won't be any other kind.
Yes, that's true. They're actually called super duper smartphones. That's the new
They're
word
all
in
going to be
Silicon Valley.
smart. There'll
Here
be
to
no
stay.
stupid phones.
Which one?
Here to stay.
Here to stay. Last one for Yossi, and then we'll get some questions.
12-year-old girl who is using Facebook.
Oh, good God, Yossi.
Say
12-year-old
that
girl
again.
using Facebook. I am perplexed about why he said that, but go right ahead.
I believe that's a violation of the terms of service.
Exactly. All right. I will ask the last question. Will the social network win the Oscar?
Likely.
Yes.
I tend more to likely.
Okay.
Probably.
Yes.
Yes. You don't know. You haven't seen
I didn't see the movie.
it. Okay. So let's get some questions
I
from
didn't
the...
read the book.
The movie was better than the book. So it's not often the case. So let's get some questions from the audience individually.
Before, I have a question to the audience.
Okay, all right.
I asked the distinguished panel what they are afraid of. What you guys are afraid of? Scream, shout the thing
No, don't
that
shout.
you are really afraid of. Go ahead. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, that's right. Good point. Let's have some questions from the audience if they're on. If not, I have tons more questions to ask them. Joe, do you have a question? Don't be shy. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, so if somebody asked me that question about what I worry about, I would say demographics. Half of the world is under 25.
Right.
How many people in this room are under 25? I'm talking age now, not... No, you can't raise your hand, Marcel. So it's about how people under 25 think
Yes.
differently than the people in this room. And I think it's pretty radical.
So are we irrelevant?
That's an excellent point. I actually think anyone under 5 is not relevant anymore. in the new things. I have a 5-year-old, and he cannot relate to a screen without touching it, and he looks somewhat like a problematic child because he keeps hitting screens like a. He looks kind of dumb when he does
smarter,
it.
he or you?
Oh, he's much smarter. But he tries to touch and manipulate screens constantly, and so I think he lives in a world where he feels that screens interact with him in a way that's different from my 8-year-old.
The follow-up to that is Connect going to change the next group of kids to where they don't expect
Okay.
Is the Microsoft Connect going to change the next group of kids where they're not even going to expect to touch the screen, they're just going to expect to interact with the screens around them?
Yeah, we just installed OGS. I think that's a very good point. Sorry, Esther?
I'd just like to hear your sentence reaction to WikiLeaks, please, all of you.
Great question. I was just going to get to that. So the WikiLeaks has been sort of a controversy in the United States, at least. I think it's probably the same opinions here. People enjoy it. I think it's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. For most, it seems to be that's the reaction. Some people are very on one side, some people are very on the other. How do you guys look at that, the idea of this sort of radical transparency, I think, of all information? And how do you consider it? Because in a lot of ways, a lot of journalism came out of what very legitimate journalism.
I think it's very hard to give a one-sentence answer. On the one hand, obviously, transparency and openness is extremely important for civic democracy, and you have to have that forum open and protected as a way for we collectively to make decisions what we go. On the other hand, it is also quite true that as long as you live in a multi-nation state with a variety of actors and complexities, whichever views you take your moral framework to be, there will be secrets and there will be issues around preserving information that has to do with everything from saving lives to kind of implementing political stuff. So it's a complicated topic.
Anyone else?
Esther, I don't have anything.
My half sentence would be there is investigative journalism online. That is what is shown by WikiLeaks from my point of view.
Anyone else?
I tend to agree with Reed.
What did, I'm sorry?
That's why I agree with him.
I said, what did Reed Thank you. I said, what did Reed say?
He's searching, not answering.
Yeah, he doesn't have anything to say about
I said it's
WikiLeaks.
complicated.
I mean, Google didn't do anything to prevent it from being distributed or to block it in the way other companies did, correct?
I think wherever there was a request from the government to do certain things, I think every company had to do from a legal perspective.
So in that topic, let's talk about that idea of governments controlling these various things, because with WikiLeaks, with Facebook in China, or not in China, in fact, all kinds of companies. When you're thinking of China, for example, Jim, is the biggest market there is, which it is, and I think there's companies coming out of that country, at a more ever-increasing speed and power, from Tencent to Baidu to others. How do you look at going into countries like that and the difficulties in Tunisia with Twitter and various, Facebook not being allowed in places? When you look at these in Iran and various places, and even in the United States, there's issues about the government requesting information. How do you look at that as you start to invest in? Because once these companies start to have so much information within them, they become a target for governments.
Well, I can just tell you what we've done in China, and that is in 2002 and 2003, we took a very hard look from an investment standpoint at what to do, and we went all in 2003 and 2004. We've invested over $1.5 billion in Chinese internet companies in the last 7 years.
How did it work?
It's working really well.
And
we'll invest. Well, I think just a personal view. I go 3 times a year. As I said, we have more partners in China than we do in Palo Alto. And if anything, we will invest more than $2 or $3 billion over the next couple of years in Chinese mobile, internet, and entertainment companies. And we absolutely believe that over time, not only does it represent an enormous opportunity, but it also, in my small way as a venture capitalist, believe that there is far too much political rhetoric back and forth between the US and China. And my personal view is it's really not very constructive. We had a Walmart board meeting in China in November, and it was right after the elections. It was night and day versus what we were reading about in the press in terms of what the actual on-the-ground discussions were like.
Between them. But so when does Facebook...
Walmart, internet, I'm not going to speak for Facebook.
I'm going to say,
in
no,
China.
but you're on the board of Facebook. You must discuss entering China on some level.
I would like
the
to
topic
use this incentive.
Well, you're giving him a chance not to answer a question.
Yossi took the mic.
Okay, all right, no, go ahead. Why isn't Facebook in China yet, and when is it going to be there?
You know I can't answer that,
Yeah, but
Kara.
you really should. I think everybody wants to know.
I think Mark Zuckerberg would be the right person to answer that. But I can speak in terms of my personal bias. We've invested $1.5 billion over 5 to 6 years. We'll invest 2 to 3 times that in Chinese internet companies in the next 5 years.
Nikesh, can you talk a little about where Google is in China right now? I mean, you're not the spokesman on this particular issue, but Google's been going back and forth and had a lot of difficulty in China.
We have people in China. We have people doing development in China. We chose to not offer our search services in China because we felt that there are too many constraints in being able to offer full information to the end user. So we offer it through Hong Kong, so people can go access the information that the Chinese government chooses to block it to do. I think there's a bigger point here, and the bigger point is, Kara, that it's an interesting phenomena. When I go to India, there's only 60 million users of the internet in India, and the Indian government is not that interested in what's happening on the internet for now, because it is sort of a phenomena on the side. But if you look at most developed markets in the world, most markets where there are hundreds of millions of users, suddenly the internet has taken center stage. And all the regulations, all the policies which were designed for a world where the internet did not exist are being re-questioned and rethought, because now you have no national borders. So there's free flow of goods between countries. You have no ability to stop taxes. You have copyright issues. So all these things. And on top of that, all of us leave digital footprints. So anything you do or I do anywhere in the world is being stored in a server somewhere by some company. It does not always have to be Facebook or Google. Every ISP has information. Every website has information. So governments are trying to understand how to handle that question, how to deal with that question. And I think one of the bigger challenges for everybody in this room is going to be how governments of various nations choose to regulate this new world, which could end up stifling various sorts of innovation of people who have companies.
Will presumably be different from every country, correct?
Sorry?
They'll presumably be different from every country. Do you recommend sort of a world view of
It
this?
will be different from every country, and the question is, if one country goes to one extreme, is that going to be enough for them to be able to stop it in that country? Because people will find ways of getting around those extremes.
Jim, how long it will be before Chinese VCs will begin to invest in U.S. entrepreneurs?
Well, they kind of did recently.
Oh, it's already happening.
Yeah.
And to Nikesh, what I would say is this. When we look around the world, and we're trying our best, the order of magnitude difference in opportunity in Chinese internet companies today versus India is remarkable. It's somewhere between 10 and 50x the number of internet and mobile media-oriented entrepreneurs we see in China. We are investing in India, we're actively investing in Brazil, but China makes all these other geographies in terms of internet investing look like child's play.
But how long it will take until they will begin to buy the US and not vice versa?
Oh, I think it's happening.
No, but when they're going to be bigger than the US buying into China?
Well, from a venture capital standpoint, I think it's probably close to equal 10 years from now. In other financial services, 3 of the top 6 banks, I believe, are in China. You can go on and on in financial services.
The United States right now, is that correct?
And I think there's...
I'm pretty sure they do.
I'm sure there's a lot more that we don't know also.
Yeah, too bad for them. It's going to be too bad, which is we're not going to pay it back. Let's go. Let me have one more question. Okay, Kallen, sorry. Go ahead.
About China?
Yeah, or anyone.
We learned the hard way not to invest in countries where we are not welcomed.
Right.
The closer you come to media, the less you are welcomed in a variety of countries, and we think there are so many opportunities outside of these countries, we prefer to go there. To come to Yossi's question, I think in these days, nobody who is really thinking about what's going on in the world is interested in having US government bonds. So that China is trying to look for alternatives to US government bonds is quite obvious. And among that, VC will play an important role.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you want to add about international? Okay, we're going to one more question with the audience, then I want to talk about devices, tablets. Go ahead. Hi, Edith.
So you asked what keeps us worried at night.
Yeah.
One of the things that really are scary is that all of these giants that sit on the stage and that are not here, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Excel, are not really doing enough for education, not taking education seriously. And I wonder why. Obviously, there is a business model issue, but I have a feeling that if everybody will get together and decide to do it, the world will be a better place.
Education around the world, you're talking about?
With technology, with all these amazing technologies that are blocked in schools, they're not really being used in a way that it can be used to create creativity, entrepreneurship, and innovation.
Educated voters are very dangerous for governments. You have to realize it.
Okay. Anyone want to take that?
I think you'd be very pleasantly surprised how much activity there is around both for-profit and non-profit technology education initiatives in Silicon Valley. It's very actively happening. There's going to be a lot of for-profit as well as non-profit investment, donation. It's not happening as fast as we would like, but it is certainly something that is happening in a very radical way.
Name 3 big. That's all right. She should.
Well, I will say that...
Is that a good benchmark for education?
Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, they both donate $100 million to education.
Oh, he was...
I just said that Microsoft, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg have donated $100 million to education.
She wants some bigger companies involved. All right, let's move on to... No, absolutely no, but he's saying it's their personal money, though they did get the money from Facebook and Microsoft.
Any member of the panel has a question to Kara?
No, let's not do that. Nobody cares what I think, except my dog. And he doesn't listen to me either. So let's talk about devices and where that's going, because I think you talked about smartphones being the way, the interesting distribution, most important thing.
Smart TV.
Smart TV. What do you think right now about this? I was just CES, and Walt Mossberg, my partner, called it TES, Tablet Entertainment Show. How do you look at all these new devices that are coming out? Most of them are mobile. Most of them are mobilely oriented.
Who is using tablets in the audience? Raise your hand.
Everybody. And it's probably an iPad because
what
most of the...
20%, 15%?
I think, when are the honeycomb tablets coming? I think a lot of them, the Android tablets have...
I think they showed them at CES.
They showed them, but they're not out yet. They're not available. They're going to be available
there
soon.
is a Samsung Galaxy tab.
That's right.
Tablet you can buy at various prices.
But the newer ones are all coming out in the spring, I think. How do you look at this change in devices, these more mobile devices, cloud-based devices, of which there's going to be a plethora of different shapes and sizes? Obviously, iPad was the first that really broke through. But for years, Bill Gates had been talking about tablets extensively, not really producing one that anybody wanted to use. But
he talked, and Steve Jobs made them.
Made them, exactly. So talk about the devices, as from a television point of view.
Yeah, for us, it will increase the consumption of our content. It will definitely complement, but not replace TV consumption, because for our medium, we get better with a larger screen. Some other media which have just information, for them the size of the screen might not be so relevant, but we know that our product has much more impact on a larger screen. Consumers prefer it on a larger screen. So the sales of large screen TVs have been up by 18%. So we like mobile devices because they are an enhancement, but not a replacement.
Not a replacement for television.
For me, it's one more sales channel, or there are several more sales channels. I hope that there will be many people who offer alternatives, so that there is not only one dictating people who produce content what's going on their platform. And we have to learn what kind of story...
You were just saying, meaning Apple dictates what you get to put on it, for example.
Like Apple. So I think Apple is great, but we should have 3 or 4 Apples. And it's more healthy, by the way. And we have to learn what kind of content fits to what platform. And I'm very hopeful that we will find formulas to be successful on different platforms.
Jim?
So being a fan of Texas Hold'em, I go all in on tablets and these devices, and it gets to our earlier comment around how is information and media being consumed by, call it the 18 to 34-year-old demographic. We could call it the Facebook generation, Twitter generation, whatever we would like. And the fact of the matter is, newspapers are dead. I am absolutely convinced that wonderful journalists have more of an opportunity than ever before, but they don't need the newspaper or the magazine. Wonderful filmmakers have better opportunities than ever before, and they don't need the studio and the Paramount distribution deals. And one of the reasons why there's this unbelievable change in the economics of the media and entertainment businesses is around these emerging tablets and the different form factors. And when I see college students debate whether a 4-inch tablet is a phone or a tablet computer, and that's all they're using, to me that just indicates that all of these other platforms are irrelevant unless you talk about the corporation and some of the data center opportunities.
Jim, did I hear you say that you like Texas Hold'em?
Yes, you did.
So I would like to suggest to you, if Jeff Pulver come to you and ask you that you will teach him how to play it, don't fall into it.
I would love to teach him. And I know how good he must be then.
The simple answer, obviously, is that we all know is that with these plethora of devices, the fact that everyone is connected and everyone is potentially on at all times is the simple trend. The deeper one, I refer earlier to the data answer. Part of what I think is going to happen is new kinds of applications will come from the fact that everyone is contributing data into the cloud. It's not just the fact that cloud trend itself is very interesting, but new applications because of that. And that's actually one of the things I think is amplified by the move to kind of universal mobility.
Which, such as, give me an example of what you're talking about.
Well, I'm looking for those things to invest in.
Okay. All right.
Anybody would like to say a word about Twitter, Foursquare, Liar, or anyone? Liar. Twitter?
No.
Any thinking?
They don't. Do you want to talk about individual? I mean,
I don't understand the question.
I don't either, actually.
I don't understand
Okay.
it.
Let's see. We only have a few more minutes. If there are any more questions from the audience, I'm going to ask one final question of everyone here. Any other question from the audience?
Each one of the audience has one final question. Let's start with
Hubert.
You didn't mention the future of television. You have this battle between NBC, CBS, and the YouTubes.
Mm-hmm.
How will the scenery be in 3-4 years from now? Will they join them, or will they still be very prohibitive? The NBC, the CBS, and the ABCs?
Okay, so the question is, it's not just in the United States, but it's everywhere. You have YouTube on one side and others. There's other attempts, Hulu, all kinds of things, versus traditional television.
social applications on TV.
Right.
No, I'd like to give a simple answer. I think fundamentally, if you look at the statistics, people still continue to watch TV in spite of the usage of online they do. Online, in theory, especially YouTube, could be a significant improvement of our reach. However, we are very much concerned about monopolistic gatekeepers, and I think the decisions a lot of studios have taken in the US to not make their content available on YouTube, especially the long-form content, I think it's a good decision. And I think from that perspective, we would like to control the distribution and the marketing and sales of our content as much as possible. So from that perspective, I believe not too many of the main stations would willingly make their content available on YouTube. And I think that TV will continue to stay, will have its usage. And frankly, everybody is always so pessimistic about TV, but you could argue that maybe one day people are watching, 3 different formats at the same time on screen while surfing the internet. So we see only good opportunities with online, but we are afraid about monopolistic gatekeepers.
But you're not afraid about advertising?
I'm not afraid about advertising because Google and these technologies have been disruptive for content where consumer had to pay before, and where the barriers of entry have been very low. But consumers never had to pay for free TV, and the barriers of entry, technology-wise, are low, but content and quality-wise are very high. And I talk from experience looking at the flop rate content has. So from that perspective, no.
But so you've got to sell YouTube and try to get premium prices for advertising. How do you answer that idea?
I don't know if this is a battle of YouTube versus TV. I think this is going to be an evolution of closed TVs versus open TVs. I think eventually in the next 5 years, almost every television will have a broadband connection behind it. And that's where the competition is going to come from, between being able to watch broadcast content or being able to watch content off the web. And at that point in time, you don't need a YouTube. You could have a content creator produce his own content and make it available to all these TVs which are connected to the broadband cable. Now, will that mean people will stop watching TV? No, they'll watch TV. There is a huge market for lean-back television, which somebody else decides how it's curated, edited for you, because that's how we're used to watching TV. Having said that, as soon as on my big screen I can port content and watch it, which I don't have to watch on my computer or on my phone, there is a probability people will watch that content too. So the creation of content is not going to stop. The consumption of content is not going to stop. The players in the middle will change between who ends up aggregating and who ends up not aggregating.
Great. Okay, one more.
Could I
go ahead.
just,
Go ahead.
If I was thinking about starting a new media company, and that's what we spend a lot of our time talking to people about, the future media opportunities and entrepreneurs, there's absolutely no way in the world we would back someone who was thinking about incorporating television, print magazines, or newspapers, possibly with the exception of sports as a category, as part of that new media company. And so for me, there's a defensive aspect, again, to the balance sheet and income statement. But if we were starting the media companies of tomorrow, today, absolutely no way would television, nor newspaper, nor print magazine be part of it in our investment view.
No,
Very briefly, he wants
I think that I understand your comment, and I think media companies have to diversify their revenue source. For example, unfortunately, we don't sell all of our advertising time we have in Germany, but we give advertising for free to online companies in exchange for long-term revenue share or an equity share. Or we even are creating our own products, because if you think about most products in the world, and forget about for online for the moment, let's say T-shirts or electronics or other products, they have three major costs: marketing, distribution, right, and production. And as a TV company, we have a lot of advertising space for free. Thanks to online, we have now a distribution opportunity where we don't have to pay listing fees. And for a lot of product categories today, you don't need any more bricks and mortar because there's a supplier surplus. So what we do is that we invent products outside of the media category to more become of a media lifestyle company versus just a pure media play. And we are diversifying our revenue sources. So I think a traditional media company, the business model needs to be, I would say, modernized, but it's still a great platform for a great future.
And I would simply say there's too much defensiveness when it comes to the major media companies around the world. And the fact is, most, call it 80 to 90%, are dying a very slow death. There are ways to radicalize that, but in my view, most of the large media companies, when they have multi-divisions and they're defending one division over the other, are basically missing on where the big new opportunities are. And as I mentioned, there is absolutely no reason, I believe, that the traditional, perhaps, standards of quality that we became accustomed to, Paramount in distribution, the wonderful organizations like the New York Times and the Washington Post as banner headlines for the top journalists, there are ways a lot of that gets disintermediated much faster than I think any of us realize.
So let me summarize. Media is dead, except if it's new media. And then it's not dead, and Jersey Shore still stinks, but it's really good. Correct? I mean, there's going to be this content, but it's going to be somewhere.
The content developers are better off than ever before, though.
Okay, on that note.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Hoffman, Jim Breyer, Paul Kallen, Nikesh Arora, Thomas Eberling, and the one and only Kara Swisher.